Hello and welcome to the Total Clarity Podcast. I'm Mike Varley.
And I'm Jessie Hyatt.
And this is week 37 of our 52-week walk around New York City.
Wow, we're getting there.
Yeah.
So this week we had a theme in Manhattan. We're back in the city.
Yeah.
And the theme of this week was writers of Manhattan.
That's right. We did sneak in one Brooklyn writer, but we'll get to that in a second. Before we dive into the writers, we wanted to draw your attention, to those that are watching, to the fact that we're wearing our sweatshirts again.
Yeah, we're wearing our Dichotomy crew neck sweatshirts once again.
Yep. And a few weeks back, we did a little recap on this season's Dichotomies, and we hadn't had it ready for sale, but now it is ready for sale. We figured out the cost structure and how we wanted to go about doing that, so we put them on again to let you know that they are now on sale.
Right. And we'll put a little link so that if you want to refresh your memory or hear for the first time what these sweatshirts are all about, you can see that. We're not going to repeat ourselves because we've already done it. So we'll put a link about that. But do you want to talk a little bit about the cost structure?
Sure. I think you have it pulled up on your phone, right?
Yeah, I have it written here on my phone. And we've also made a little graphic that maybe we'll put over this video.
That's right.
Meaning you, Mike, maybe you'll do that.
I will do that.
Perfect. So in all of our cost structures, we break things down by variable costs and fixed costs.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Variable costs are costs that show up in every single item. So, for example, in these sweatshirts, there's the labor that goes into printing them because every single sweatshirt needs to be printed. So that's 10 minutes for printing. There's time for heat setting. There's time for setting up the screen. There's time for cleaning the screen. In total, we say that it takes 40 minutes to print each sweatshirt. Mm-hmm. There's delivery labor, which we have as free because we walk these sweatshirts. We add it into our route. We don't do it on a separate day. We add it into the route that we're already doing anyway.
Yep.
So we don't charge for that. There's material cost, 74 cents of ink per shirt. And there's the crew neck itself, which these cost $7 a piece from Udelco. And I didn't say our 40 minutes is at $25 an hour for the printing, so that's $16.68. So our variable costs total are $24.41. And again, variable cost, so that's like for each sweatshirt, the actual cost of each sweatshirt is $24.41. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That makes sense. So then there's also the fixed costs, which are the costs that you pay once.
Yeah.
And then it has to get filtered in through however many you think that, you might sell or you might make. So for these, the fixed costs are the screens, which cost $169 to get 2 screens made. Mm-hmm. It's the squeegee, which is $15.12. It's the blackout tape, which is what you use on the screen to cover up the edges and make sure that ink doesn't go through, $13.07. It's the design labor, which took us 15 hours to design these, $25 an hour, that's $3.75. And then it's the rental car to Udelco, which was $65. So our total fixed cost here is $637.19. We did a little standard wholesale calculation and a standard retail markup just to give an idea of what the industry might charge. And then we basically just pick a number in between that makes sense. And so these sweatshirts are going to be $89 a piece.
That's right.
Which is what they are. I was going to say which I think is a great deal, but I realize in talking about pricing and labor, I think just the general concept of that's a great deal, that's not a great deal, that seems like a lot, that seems like a little. It's all so dependent on who you are and what you know about things and what you like and how much money you have and what money means to you and like how you were brought up in how you were supposed to buy things and spend money on things. So I don't even think I should be putting a judgment on that. That is just the price. And I just explained it very clearly why it's the price.
Right. Yep.
It is the appropriate price.
Yes, based on math.
Based on math.
Yeah.
And nothing else.
Yeah. So that is something that we've been pretty transparent and interested in. We've said it a number of times on this podcast and in person with various people. We are interested in demonstrating how much things actually cost and, trying to put together goods that reflect that are also not just created for this purpose, that are sourced by us as things that are reused, but nice items.
Yeah, exactly. And I especially think that understanding the reason that I wanted to read through all of these costs for this time, I don't think we did it last time, is that I do think that understanding, I think a lot of times when we think about how much something costs, we think more about those variable costs, which are the costs that go into each thing. So like I said, in total, each one of these separately is $24.41 cost to us.
Right.
And then the markup is to $89. So I think a lot of times people are like, well, how did you get there? How did you figure that you should add $60 to that? That's a 4-time markup. I'm confused. They're trying to gouge me or something.
Right.
But in reality, there's all these other costs that have to get filtered in, and you have to pay yourself for your time, and you have to pay for all the materials and all these things that you just sort of are there already.
Yeah.
And I think maybe people don't always think about that.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit arbitrary. There is math, but there is also a little bit of well, maybe this seems right, or this is how many maybe we'll sell, and it's kind of hard to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't believe this is part of the sheet that we present, but there also is the number that we have to break even with the costs.
It's on there.
Oh, it is on there too. Yeah.
It's so the break even formula is the fixed costs divided by the price minus the variable cost.
Yeah.
And we break even at 9.9 sweatshirts.
That's right.
So if we sell 10 sweatshirts, we'll get a 0.1 profit.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I don't know. Will we sell 10 sweatshirts? Really unclear.
Yeah.
Be wonderful to sell 10 sweatshirts. If we don't, that's totally fine too. But it gives you a sense of oh, wow. Yeah, well, then I guess it makes sense to be $89 insofar as if it were cheaper, then you're going to have to sell 20 something,
I don't even think we have 20 sweatshirts
to
sell.
We didn't buy 20 sweatshirts to sell.
And then if it goes the other way too, 10 sweatshirts keeps it pretty nice and unique. If we only had 5 sweatshirts or something, we'd have to double the price.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think it helps. I hope it's kind of interesting to people. I find this endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, we both do. We hope you found it interesting as well. If you do, leave some comments. Let us know because we like talking about it.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about it more, but I think we probably don't want to overdo it if it's not something that people want to know about.
Right.
If they're just let me buy a sweatshirt.
Yeah. But these will be on sale for the next 2 to 3 weeks until we go into spring. So March is definitely sweatshirt weather.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting to that time where it's one day it's warm, the next day it's cold. So get yourself a sweatshirt.
But sweatshirt weather lasts also.
Oh, sure.
You can get yourself a sweatshirt now and prep for one of my favorite times to wear a sweatshirt, I gotta say, is pre-midsummer, sometime in early-ish June, when it's warm during the day. But if you're going to be out late, especially if you're going to end up on a rooftop or something, bring a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Because it gets chilly.
Yeah.
And it's such a nice chilly because you haven't felt chilly for a while.
Yeah.
So.
That's a little
You
Rigo
can always
foresight.
get it's Rigo foresight.
Yeah.
Thanks. Again, if you don't know what we're talking about, click the link below
Rigo
to
sight,
learn what Rigo is.
Rigo flight. Yeah. But that's, I think, it for now on
Yeah.
these sweatshirts.
I think we can move on.
Yeah. Let's go on to our writing.
Okay.
So, yeah, we did a walk surrounding writers of New York. Writing in New York has a very rich, long history of different people that have come to make it here as writers, people that have moved here after they've made it as writers. And there are so many writers that have a history and roots here that you could do an entire year of walking around and each week just talk about one writer.
Sure.
And you would still probably, I don't know, you probably need to do it for 10 years, you know, if you were.
At least, and then more writers are being made every day.
That's
so.
right. That's right. So what the cross-section of writers that we're going to talk about today, I would say is fairly arbitrary. We tried to visit locations where the homes were already in place, so that are still in place. There are some exceptions there. But that was one. It tried to have some degree of diversity in both the eras and sexes and racial backgrounds. So that is represented to some degree. But ultimately, as I just said, you really can't encapsulate the breadth and depth of all the writers that exist in New York. So it is a little bit of a crapshoot what we're doing. But we hope that you enjoy the ones that we did cover.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess we'll just get right into it.
Let's get into it. I guess you're leading the way here. I was going to ask if we're starting in Brooklyn. You mentioned earlier that when I said it was the writers of Manhattan, there's also one in Brooklyn.
That's right. There is one in Brooklyn, and that's where we're going to start.
Perfect.
Yeah. So following along with the route that we devised for the week, we take the train from our home to the Grand Street L stop in Brooklyn, which is at the corner of Grand and Bushwick Avenue.
That's right.
And we walk just 0.2 miles or so down to where Betty Smith, who was the author of...
A Tree Grows in Brooklyn?
That's right. A tree,
ding, ding, ding.
A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. The famous book that is often a joke, like, haha, a tree grows in Brooklyn? I don't believe it.
Or when you see a tree, it's like, oh, look, it's the tree that grew in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I feel like people told that joke to me when I first lived in Brooklyn or anytime, when I first lived here.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a funny thing to say.
And now we have the Million Trees Project, so now the book should be renamed Million Trees Grow in Brooklyn.
Million Trees Grow in Brooklyn, that's right. Well, and I didn't really, it might have been that I just forgot about this, but I didn't realize now how close I used to live to that location.
Yeah.
So I used to live at the corner of Metropolitan and Bushwick, and we were only like 3 or 4 blocks from that. I mean, the Grand Street stop was sometimes the stop I would get off at to go home.
Yeah.
So just really, I don't know, half a mile from where I was.
But did you know until this week that that's where that was?
That's what I was just saying. I may have and had forgotten about it, but I just realized that was the case, yeah.
I think for some reason, like I remember reading that book as a kid and really liking it. And then not knowing as a kid, like the different neighborhoods of Brooklyn.
Right.
And then by the time I did know the different neighborhoods of Brooklyn, for some reason thinking it was somewhere further south.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know why, just thinking it was like maybe like near the Navy Yard or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any reason for it.
Well, the Navy Yard, that is a portion of Williamsburg potentially as well,
Yeah.
neighbors
I guess so.
at the South Williamsburg neighbors.
Yeah.
The Naval Yard.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, so a little bit, just some facts. We have some facts about all the authors, just the the tantalizing ones I can pull. I can see Jesse is already trying to steal looks at my notebook,
Well,
which is...
it's hard not to when it's right there. We're
Don't make
talking
me...
about writers, and you're a writer, and
I'm
I
gonna
like to read your writing.
So, Betty Smith, The Tree Grows in Brooklyn is largely based on her experiences growing up, which I think a lot of people know.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know if it was initially kind of thought of that way, but she came to communicate that to people, you know, as it got famous.
Right.
And it was immediately successful. Now, it came out in 1943,
Okay.
which, if you can think about when that is, that coincides with World War II.
Sure.
So it was extremely popular with soldiers overseas.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I think probably a lot of people that resonated with their upbringing to some degree.
Yeah, probably.
And I mean, although it was probably the soldiers that were overseas were maybe a generation younger, but ultimately
How old
the
was
idea.
she when it came out?
I'm not 100% sure, but she was writing about her childhood, so I
Well, did she grow up in the Depression? Is that when this was based, or was it just that she was
think
an
it was
immigrant family and it was because they were poor? That was the whole
yeah.
point of the story, basically. I mean,
think
it
it
wasn't
was-
the point of the story, but it was like that was the main focus of the story was that they were really poor
Yeah, and it was,
and their community was poor. But
and her father was like a dreamer, but he was an alcoholic, and
Right.
like,
Right.
it was like, I think it was broken up into 4 books, and it's like different sections of her life growing up for like a period of 2 years, I think.
oh,
And so, yeah, I can't 100% remember if it was during the Depression or not. I think the recollection I have was that it was just like they were going to be poor regardless if it was Depression
right.
or not Depression.
Yeah, I think it was more that they were immigrants.
Yeah, but I think,
Okay.
I mean, the same way that it resonated with us as kids, I think it's an easy read and
Yeah.
fun, and
Yeah.
probably people saw their upbringing in it in some way
Yeah.
too.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think even. Sorry, this whole podcast is just going to be about this one book. I think even as a kid that didn't grow up like that, really at all,
Yeah.
there still was something that resonated with me.
Yeah.
I think something just about like recognizing that life is a struggle at a young age.
Hmm.
And like this is written from the perspective of a child,
Yeah.
noticing these things and like finding joy in like the small things, but also being aware of the larger struggle.
Mm. Yeah, maybe.
And it like a lot of times you don't, as a kid, you're not thought of someone that can understand these bigger concepts. And I think reading about other kids that do understand these bigger concepts like made me feel seen or something, or like made me feel like, oh yeah, some like other people get it too.
Yeah. Sure. I think that makes sense. I don't know that's a consequence of it being prescribed to you in school as well.
Yeah, I did also have to read it for school.
Yeah. So she ended up writing 4 novels,
Okay.
and the first 3 of them were set in Brooklyn,
Oh.
and they were all the same kind of autobiographical vein. I guess that was kind of her thing.
Yeah.
And the 4th one was set in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I believe,
Okay.
and that was her experience going with her husband while he was going to college, I believe.
Okay.
And yeah, that was the breadth of her novel experience. Again, the first one was like immensely popular. The second one was not as popular, and then the other 2 didn't receive the same traction. But I mean, the first one was enough for anybody to be,
Yeah.
a household name.
Totally.
There were 2 movies and a Broadway musical made about A Tree Grows in
Oh,
Brooklyn.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the first movie won 2 Oscars.
Wow.
Yeah. One child actress it was a special back when they had awards for kid actors.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, explicitly. And so the person that played her, I think it's Fanny. I'm probably getting this wrong, but I think the person that played her won the Oscar.
Oh, cool.
And then the person that played her dad, supporting actor, won an Oscar as well.
Oh.
Yeah. And so as far as the actual building itself, which we have footage for all the buildings, it is under renovation currently. So there's a porta potty in front and construction workers coming in and out.
Yeah.
But I believe it to be the same building still. It is a nice building. It's an impressive facade, and looks like there's a restaurant on the first floor now or something going on. It's like wood paneling, a wood paneled facade as part of it. But it made me wonder if part of the selling point of it was that it was the Tree Grows in Brooklyn house or not.
Yeah, I wonder. It's interesting. I mean, with this whole thing, I feel like this might be the first one where a lot of our landmarks are kind of just these random apartment buildings.
Yeah.
That, like, some of them have plaques, which I guess we'll get into, but that one didn't have a plaque, right? And the ones that don't have a plaque, like, you don't know what it is unless you know what it is.
Yeah.
And because there's so many writers, like, they've lived in places just like we've lived in. Like,
yeah.
There's so many buildings in New York that have, if they're older than like 50 years or something, like they've probably had some famous people living in them to some degree.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't even know if I would, at first I'd say like any real estate person worth their salt would like know this, but like, I mean, you would have to be maybe totally ignorant to like not know something like this, because it's like people, if you talk to superintendents or whatever, like this information is something that would, and then you leverage
Google
that.
The address at some point and it
exactly,
would show up.
just once, and then you use that to sell the, you find somebody that's interested in that, because 700 Grand Street does not have a book that millions of copies were sold about it.
Right.
So.
But at the same time, then, I also don't know how many of these are landmarked. And so part of it, like, you might sell it under that if someone cares, or you might just be selling it because of the location and someone's like, okay, I don't care. I'm like just going to renovate this building and rent it out as condos.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
It's hard to know. Depends on the realtor.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on because we have
a
bunch of authors to get to.
Yeah, let's get to them.
Next, so we walk over the Williamsburg Bridge, and then we go downtown all the way. Yep, that's what I was looking for. And we go to Battery Park, and we are, the neighborhood, which is known as Battery Park, Fidei, I don't know what you want to call it.
Yeah.
And we go to a really interesting set of buildings where Herman Melville was born.
Wow.
Yeah. He was born on 15 State Street.
Okay.
Now, this is one of two instances here where the original building does not exist.
Yeah.
Certainly, there are plenty of writers' homes, either they live there, they were born there, whatever, that don't exist in New York City. This is just two instances that we happen to cover. And it's interesting because you go down to where his house was, and there are two buildings that are completely out of place compared to everywhere else. It is a shrine to Elizabeth Ann Seton. It's a church.
Okay.
And then it is the James Watson House. And these are, I think, 7 and 9 State Street or something like that.
Okay.
And then 15 State Street is a giant tower.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So these other people got their houses saved, but then they didn't save Herman Melville's?
No, they did not save Herman Melville's. Well, so James Watson House was built in 1793.
Oh, wow.
And it has these beautiful pillars. I mean, we're playing the footage now.
Who's James Watson? I feel like I don't want to ask because I won't want to seem
ignorant,
but I don't know who it is.
I don't think he was anybody. I think I read it, but like it's just because his house has been there since 1793. Okay. They just know whose it was. I could be wrong, But honestly, I don't think anybody could call me on it that's watching this. So, you know, if you are, call me out in the comments. But yeah, and
Call
so
us out, but don't write us off.
yeah, oh boy.
Sorry.
So
I'll try not to make any more dumb puns.
So that was done in 1793, and it still looks. I mean, I think they've changed. You know, they've repainted it, and so, like it changes slightly from era to era.
Okay.
But it is still the same, you know, exterior. And then the Shrine of Elizabeth Ann Seton is actually from 1965, but they did a good job making it look kind of similar. And
I don't know who she is either.
she was the first saint born in America. We've actually encountered her before in Staten Island. We were at her gravesite.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why was she a saint?
She was very good.
You don't know.
I mean, she was the first saint in America. I mean, she performed some miracles. You need to be a saint to perform some miracles.
You know what? Okay, I remember talking about this because then I asked you a whole bunch of questions. You didn't have the answers. So I was Googling, like, what are the miracles that people have done?
Yeah.
And then I read to you for a long time from my phone.
You're right.
While we were walking.
Yeah, and I still don't remember.
I don't remember either. But I'd recommend it to people. It's a fun activity. Google about real miracles. And lots of cool shit.
Yeah. So the James Watson House is now, I think, it was an orphanage at some time. It may still be, but I doubt it. I think it might be like a convent house.
Oh,
the two of them are in some way linked in a meaningful way.
Cool.
But it is, I mean, the buildings themselves would look tall in some other neighborhoods in the city.
Right.
But in comparison, it is impressive in one of those ways where, like, it really leaves a mark on you that, like, there are all these buildings that are sky high, and then there's these, like, two things that have just persisted.
Crazy. Yeah.
As for Melville himself, he very famously wrote Moby Dick.
Right.
He was not recognized in his day, really. Moby Dick, in particular, was considered to be like this rambling, raving book about, you know, the whale industry, the whaling industry, which was a big deal back then. You know, whale, oil was what lit these lamps. And he himself had been involved in the industry, and so it was, you know, the experience that he had accrued informed the book. It was not, I don't think, autobiographical in any way. I mean, it's about Captain Ahab chasing this whale, which is representative of, you know, larger human struggle, you know.
Right. But he wrote while on the whaling ships, right?
I don't know.
Or was he just on the whaling?
Not this book in particular, but there were other books that preceded this that were also about, you know, his jaunts around while whaling.
I think that's really crazy and kind of cool because I feel like writing in general is thought of as like this sort of like soft skill, like someone that like sits at home and like just write. Like it's like there's no danger to it. But this dude was like, he was a writer. He had that I'm going to sit at home and write thing. But then he also was like a whaler. Like it's like the craziest job that people have ever had.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it runs the gamut. I mean, when you say that, I think of like Hemingway, which was that kind of like, you know.
That's a good point.
Macho drinking man.
Yeah. But I don't think Hemingway was like he went to the bullfights, but he didn't like fight a bull or like the running of the bulls. He didn't run with the bulls. He just got fucked up watching it. Like,
well, he was also involved in war.
Oh, he was he was like a soldier?
I believe he volunteered in the Spanish Civil War.
Oh, okay. All right. So maybe
he was definitely, he had some grit in whatever he was. I mean, but it was like, you know, too far in one other direction. And there's plenty of other examples, or adventure writers, whatever.
Sure.
But I understand what you're saying. There's also the people that just sit.
Like today,
right.
We think of writers as like, oh, I'm a writer and I sit on my computer, or I sit and I write.
Yeah.
And it's not often, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure there's plenty of writers out there today that are also doing crazy like physical things, but
Yeah.
it just seems like a I don't even know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
For me, it's interesting to think of someone to have that duality.
Yeah. Well, when I think about what contemporary writing is, there's a section we can talk about
Okay,
a little
great.
bit there.
We'll get to it when you're ready.
I've never read Moby Dick. I have read Bartleby the Scrivener.
Is that also Herman Melville?
Yeah, it's a short story.
Oh.
And I had forgotten that he had written it until I was reviewing the notes for this. And that is about a guy that it's a short story, fictional short story about this character Bartleby, and it's narrated through his boss.
Okay.
And he hires these scriveners, which are guys that copy legal documents.
Okay.
And he had two people in there before Bartleby that were kind of like silly characters, but they did their job, whatever. And then Bartleby started there, and he was doing like a really great job, and then he did an okay job, and then he was doing a bad job, and then one day they gave him some work to do, and he said, "I prefer not to." And then he kept just saying that was the only thing that he would say anymore. And the narrator, his boss, was like having a hard time. He didn't know how to fire him. He couldn't do anything. Then he found out he was living inside the building. And then rather than like deal with firing him, he just moved the offices.
What?
And then the people that took over had him like detained. And then he ended up in jail. And he said I would prefer not to with respect to eating. And then he ended up dying.
Oh my God.
Because he just gave up on life. And it came out after Moby Dick, and there's kind of some idea that perhaps, it was his feelings of like, I wrote this amazing thing, and nobody is respecting that I wrote this amazing thing, and like, this is how I feel about my life right now. So that I have to do this. So,
wow.
yeah, but I remember enjoying it when I read it. I think it was high school. It might have been college.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was funny in the middle, and then it got pretty upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the malaise of white collar work, I guess, in some ways too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was like George Costanza for a second.
No, I don't think that was
But
kind of a part
but
of
no.
anybody's tool bag for writing back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, he had a very strong beard game. He would have done very well in this
Herman
era.
Melville did?
He did, yeah.
That's because it was the 1800s, right?
Yeah.
And there's that Portlandia sketch about how it's like hipsters in the 18.
I don't know what sketch you're referring to.
That's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, it's kind of a common theme with a lot of the writers that just happened to be picked. They were either gay or believed to be gay.
Oh.
So scholars believe that he was gay, although it was not something that at that time had come out. So
Okay.
yeah, that's another part of his life. And then on the 100th anniversary of his birth, which was 1920.
Okay.
Which is 100 years from now.
Oh yeah! Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are running around this kind of 100 years ago time frame, which is interesting as we were going through this. Anyway, on his centennial of his birth, there was revived interest, or even one might say like kindled for the first time interest in his work.
Yeah.
And from there was just this long run of scholarly interest and, writing academic papers and really investing in Moby Dick and his career as a whole.
Oh wow.
And so
but he was not alive by then, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, he was quite
he
gone.
was long gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
as
Melville.
it is with a lot of artists and writers.
Yeah.
We don't pay attention to them until they can't participate in the conversation anymore.
Yeah. Well, we have some writers that were very successful in their time and not so much now, and some that were not so much then and are now.
Yeah.
So. From there, we go up the west side over to Greenwich Village, which was and remains, a huge spot for artists.
Sure.
And there seemed to be, the picture that I created from these cross-section of writers, I don't know this to be 100% certain, but it feels like there was this era around like the 1900s to I don't know when, 30s, 40s, something like that, where writers were very much like rock stars, and the era of the artists that we saw that were in Greenwich Village at the time were really treated like celebrities.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
like who?
Well,
are we ready to talk about him?
Well, we can go with the first one. She lived at 75.5 Bedford Street.
Oh, that's not a real street number.
It turns
What
out
is this, Harry Potter?
it's something like that. 75.5 Bedford Street is where Edna St. Vincent Malay lived.
Oh.
One of the great literary names. And she was very popular in the first third of the 1900s.
Uh-huh.
She was the first female winner of the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry. And I'm going to put a little caveat to this.
Oh.
When the Pulitzer was formally the Pulitzer. So there were like 3 years before 1922 or 23 when there was like some quasi-Pulitzer that was awarded.
Oh.
And there were 2 women poets that were awarded that then.
Okay.
So she was the first one to win it when it was formally the Pulitzer Prize.
Okay. But it was... So 2 women won in the 3 years before it was formally
Yes.
the Pulitzer. And then when did Edna win?
It was either 22 or 23. I didn't happen to write that down for some reason.
Okay. Wow, that's kind of interesting though that like in the first couple years it went to women and then they were like, "Oh wait, let's change it." And then it was like all men for 20 some years and then Edna.
Well, I don't know if it was
first.
all men for 20-something years after that.
Oh, I thought you said in the 23rd year of the official Pulitzer.
No.
In 1923.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well.
But, I mean, that is something that I noticed, that the early 20s were, particularly progressive years for women, period.
Interesting.
In New York and in America, presumably as a consequence. I mean, New York at that time being very progressive, very avant-garde. She was openly bisexual, and she was kind of seen like when I was mentioned earlier, like the idea of like celebrities, she was considered this electric performer and like muse to the public at large.
Oh, wow.
And people would just flock to see her and really be enamored with her.
Huh.
Yeah. And so she also just had a number of lovers of both sexes as well that were also similarly enamored. She did not want to get married. She was, just, I guess just a muse to all.
Wow.
And she had a poem that people, I guess, use the first line of very frequently, which I thought was applicable to your particular week this week.
Oh, what?
It is.
I got excited and then I was like, what is it going to be?
My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes, and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light.
Oh, that's nice.
So the candle burning at both ends
that part,
is an Edna St. Vincent Millay quote.
Oh, interesting. So that wasn't a phrase until she wrote it.
To my knowledge, no. I mean, it's on the plaque that is on 75.5. Why is it 75.5, you may ask?
I didn't ask it, but yeah, I could.
One may ask.
I might.
I
just said it's not real. So I guess it's kind of like
It's
asking.
because it's a tiny building.
Oh, it's that tiny one?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that tiny house.
Yeah, that's
that's
right.
her house?
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah. And so
It's cute. If anybody's in New York, Check out that tiny house.
That's right. In Greenwich Village on Bedford
It's
Street.
not tiny like the tiny houses of today where they're like on wheels and you can like fit it in your pocket or whatever, but it's like skinny and it's cute.
Yeah. And yeah, so that she didn't live there for a long time, but she also was involved in the foundation of the Cherry Lane Theater, which is just down the street.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the oldest off-Broadway theater in the city.
Cool. I
Yeah.
wonder if it's still, it looked like when we were there they had signs up of shows. I wonder if they're still doing shows there, or like if they'll have shows post-COVID.
Right. Yeah, I presume they will.
Probably.
Yeah.
Cool.
But, and that little elbow street there is one of the nicer streets in Manhattan as well,
Yeah.
I'd say.
It's nice. It's so quiet.
Yeah.
And it's really nearby, like bustling, bigger streets.
Yeah.
But when you're on that, it's like just one block down, and you feel like it's like feels like you're in a little neighborhood.
So that is Edna's very brief background. There's another home nearby, 5 Bank Street, which is Willa Cather.
Okay.
And I guess it's not a home because it is another instance of a building that has since been destroyed.
Oh.
So now it is like a much larger apartment complex, and 5 Bank Street is a part of that, what makes up that complex.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Is Bank Street, that's in the West Village too? Or
Everything
Greenwich?
here, we're still in Greenwich.
Okay.
And she wrote novels of life on the plains. And she also, she won the 1923 Pulitzer for the book One of Ours. And that was the first, she was the first woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for Literature,
Oh,
1923.
wow. All right.
So she moved to New York in the early 1900s and just stayed. from
But
there.
then she moved to New York, but then she wrote about the plains.
Yeah, she wrote about where she was from.
Okay.
And even though there was not a location for that, I wanted to call it out because I had to read My Antonia when I was in high school, and it was maybe the hardest book. I remember it being particularly difficult to get through.
Oh, really?
Not because it was like language was difficult. It was just very much not a book that I could
that
handle.
you were wanting to read.
Yeah. I have no idea. I mean,
Like just the content was slow,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I mean, it was about life on the plains.
yeah. I just remember it was like a summer reading assignment,
Yeah.
and I remember like reading it 10 or 15 pages at a time, and either like falling asleep or just like reading it like with my like on my knees and like on the couch and being like, I gotta read more, I gotta read more.
It's weird that, it's hard, those books that you just can't get into it for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't think it's any indictment of the work. I would need to
Yeah.
read again. It just wasn't, something
Yeah,
that I
it
could
just
read
wasn't grabbing you
as
at that
a
time.
teenager.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's just as an interesting, important thing to think about when you think about books, where it's like,
Yeah.
I'm forced to read this thing. I must continue.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I mean, this is something I kind of wanted to talk about at some point. I read a lot. I used Cliff Notes a lot. Did you?
No.
Was it not like available, or did you just feel like that was like against your...
Probably was like against, I maybe in college I read a couple of them, but like ultimately I enjoyed reading for the most part, so it was just not something that I was going to do.
I guess talking about burning a candle at both ends, I was doing that from an early age, and I enjoyed reading, and if the book like grabbed me, I could like, if it was a book that I was like, this is great, I would like fly through it and read the book. But a lot of times I would either just read the Cliff Notes because I was like, I can't get through this, or I'd have that kind of experience where I'm like, okay, I have to read 10 pages, and I'd get through the 10 pages and be like, I don't even know what I just read. Like I'd read the whole book, like I'd be reading the words, and I'd get to the end of a page and be like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know this person doesn't mean anything to me. This name is no one. And like, who are these people? What are they doing? I don't know what it's like none of it was actually going in.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I would read Cliff Notes first, and then I'd read like if I was having a hard time with the book, I'd read the Cliff Notes first so I could like understand who everyone was and like understand the whole story. And then it would allow me to actually appreciate the writing because I like knew what we were reading about.
Yeah.
So I used it in a lot of different ways, but I think something that isn't, or at least wasn't really communicated to me.
Yeah.
It was more just like, you have to read this and then we're going to talk about it in class, and like you can kind of participate in the 35-minute class that we have or not.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever understood, and I don't know if my teachers even understood, that it was like part of this is about the like writing style. You know, like I think I was always just trying to like know the plot and like it not even applying it to anything. Like there's just so much more than like knowing the plot to a book.
Yeah.
And I feel like Cliff Notes was really good for knowing the plot, but then if I didn't read the book,
right,
then it's just like I know what it's about and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the teachers might be trying to test you on or what. I mean, I do think that being able to discern the plot through writing styles that might be difficult or you being unused to them is in itself a useful exercise.
Yeah.
Which would be diffused by the idea of reading Cliff Notes. But
yeah,
I mean, I don't know.
I don't really know. Maybe we should at some point talk to a teacher that writes curriculum or something, because honestly, I don't even know what the point of having kids read books is. Like, besides, people should know how to read, but like, I think I was like, I just have to read these books. I guess I have to prove that I know how to read.
Right.
Bigger words every year, longer books. I don't know. I never really got the point.
I think there are all sorts of reasons that you could be doing that.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's worth getting into.
We don't have to get any further into it. I just wanted to know if you ever use Cliff Notes.
No.
I wanted to know it publicly.
I mean, yeah, I probably
think it's
did
great.
at some point.
I think it's a great resource.
Sure. Cliff.
We'll put a link
Thanks
to
a lot,
Cliff
Cliff.
Notes in the
Yeah.
in case anyone wants to check out that site.
It's great. This is a great site.
Anyway, go on.
Yes, we're going now over to 10th Street, where there were three different authors that we covered. I'm sure countless more that lived on this one section between 5th and 6th Avenue on 10th Street. Beautiful block, really gorgeous houses. And Sinclair Lewis was our first author. He lived in 37 West 10th Street. And he was the first American to win the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1930. And his whole vibe...
What did he win it for? Do you know?
The Nobel, I think in general, the Nobel Prizes are not, in literature, not necessarily awarded for one book.
Oh, it's...
But when they like do their write-up for why, the book that was referenced was called Babbitt.
Okay.
And it actually, Babbitt was turned into a word, which I've never heard it used, but it means a professional man who conforms unthinkingly to prevailing middle class standards.
Say that one more time. A professional man?
Do you need the Cliff Notes version?
Shut up.
A professional man who conforms unthinkingly to prevailing middle class standards.
Yeah, I need the Cliff Note. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So his whole work was critical of American capitalism and materialism in the span of time that was between the two world wars. So,
that sounds like it could still be applicable today.
Yeah. And so his first book was, I think his first book sold like 4 million copies or something.
Wow.
I can't believe I didn't write it down. So any Lewis fans can give me hell in the comments if you want. But
Or just write the name of the book.
But the idea was that he was very popular in his time, but his popularity declined as he went. Whereas some of his contemporaries in other genres, like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway, kind of ended up taking over in terms of popularity as the decades came.
Yeah.
However, he actually had a recent revival due to his 1935 book, It Can Happen Here, which was a dystopian satire about a fascist becoming president.
Oh!
If you might imagine why something like that would become popular in 2016. It was,
Yeah.
So...
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I thought this was interesting. This is an excerpt from his Nobel acceptance speech. In America, most of us, not readers alone, but even writers, are still afraid of any literature which is not a glorification of everything American, a glorification of our faults as well as our virtues. America is the most contradictory, the most depressing, the most stirring of any land in the world today.
Wow.
So it's interesting because that feels resonant to stuff that's going on today.
Totally.
But that was at a time when America was ascendant. It had not achieved its superpower status at that time.
Right.
1930, it was kind of in the midpoint, certainly, and that was just the crest of the Depression. They had no idea how long that was going to last. But yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting that the same sentiment can apply almost 100 years later and with a completely different context of where this country is in relation to the rest of the world.
Yeah. So that's Sinclair Lewis. The building associated with it is very nice. As I said, the whole block is really beautiful. And I'm sure I've already shown it at this point. I don't know what more there is to say about it. Now, just crossing the street over to your right, there are two houses. One I didn't write much about, but I want to call it out because as we were walking down the street, I saw it. It's Emma Lazarus.
Mm-hmm.
Emma Lazarus, very famous for writing the poem that is on the Statue of Liberty.
What does it say? Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses.
Yes, a little more.
I don't remember how to end.
Yearning to breathe free.
Oh. Did I get the beginning?
Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm kind of impressed with my memory.
Good job.
Thank you.
So there's a lot more to her history as an activist as well as a writer, but there's a plaque on 18 10th Street that signifies that she lived there. And then just two houses down, Mark Twain.
Oh.
Yes, he lived at that house from 1900 to 1901.
Oh,
so
earlier.
Earlier.
Like a classic New York move.
Well, this was, I think.
Sign a 1-year lease and move on.
Well, he only stayed there for that length of time because he was such a celebrity that people wouldn't stop bothering him.
Oh, also feels fitting for that neighborhood.
Yeah. And
wow.
So he
was already really well known when he moved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And this house, in addition to having this Mark Twain backstory, is actually known for being a haunted house.
Oh.
It's nicknamed the House of Death.
Oh, what? Why?
Many people have died there. There are believed to be over 22 ghosts in this home.
What?
Yes. And
all separate, did they know each other or
No. They didn't know each other. I'm presuming.
Were they all old? Were they
I don't know. There isn't any. I didn't do any research on the 22. Again, this could have been a whole episode.
Maybe one day.
There's one particularly tragic one that happened fairly recently.
Oh.
Where this man, was an attorney, Joel Steinberg, he beat his adopted daughter to death.
What?
Yeah, and she was 6 years old. Yeah.
Oh, God.
So yeah, that's when like the
What?
House of Death name like really stuck. Yeah. And
When was that?
that was like in this century.
Jesus.
Yeah.
What a piece of shit.
Yeah. And so
Damn.
as I said, it's known for being inhabited by ghosts.
Yeah.
And somehow Mark Twain's ghost itself has been observed there, even though he was there for only 1 year.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I don't think there's a lot that we're still like researching and hypothesizing about. I don't think we have
ghosts?
the whole ghost thing figured out yet.
Oh, you don't think so? Okay.
Just like how they work and how they spread and everything.
Right,
Like, you know,
right.
we're learning new things every day.
Somebody, a woman came into their living room and saw a man dressed in all white with crazy wild hair. And she asked who he was. And the ghost replied, "My name is Clemens, and I got problems here I gotta solve."
Whoa. The paparazzi.
Maybe. Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's that house.
Wow. Do they give like does someone live there now?
People live there as far as I can
Why?
tell. I mean, you know.
They shouldn't.
Yeah. So turning the block down to 9th Street, just one
Okay.
street, we're at 29 West 9th Street,
Yeah.
and there that's where Maurice Sendak lived.
Yeah, who's that?
Maurice Sendak is a illustrator, author, known very famously for Where the Wild Things Are.
Oh, yeah, we were there
Yeah.
earlier today.
That's right. 1963 was when Where the Wild Things Are came out. He also, prior to that, illustrated the Little Bear series of books.
I don't know that.
Yeah, that's a famous series. As of 2009, which is pretty outdated, it had sold over 19 million copies, Where the Wild Things Are.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That was a good book. I liked that book.
It's very iconic for its art style and
Yeah.
for kind of being subversive. You know, very simple story. A kid is sent to bed early
Yeah.
without, getting his dinner because
Yeah.
he's misbehaved, and so he goes to where the wild things are to be the king.
In his sleep.
Well, I don't know if he's in his sleep. Or,
Oh.
I mean, I don't remember. I'm sure at the end of the book was he was dreaming or something, but I don't know if he is actually dreaming
I
as
don't
far as he
remember.
considers.
See, this is a book that I didn't read the Cliff Notes of, actually, so I don't remember the plot.
The Idiot's Guide. You read The Idiot's
No,
Guide?
I read How to Read Where the Wild Things Are for Dummies. At 6, that's what my parents got for me.
Yeah.
No, I just remember the illustrations,
Yeah.
really.
So he had over 90 books illustrated himself. He wrote 19 books and illustrated them as well.
Yeah.
He was Jewish, which was a big impact on his childhood because his extended family died in the Holocaust.
Oh, wow.
Many of his extended family died in the Holocaust, and it had a profound effect on how he experienced childhood, which
Sure.
is meaningful considering he wrote so many children's books.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. He was also gay, but kept it from his parents,
Hmm.
and he had a partner for 50 years.
Oh.
But he kept it private because he didn't want to disappoint his parents,
Oh,
which
that's
is sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
He lived it was 29 West 9th Street, which I may have mentioned already, which is a really nice house. It's unclear if the facade has been redone or anything.
Yeah,
but
it just looks super like clean and fresh.
Yeah.
But it also looks like it could potentially have been like that. We also could see there was someone in there and he had the lights on, and you could see on the second floor, the ceiling was like so cool. It had like this weird, like, it was just like weird architecture, like vaulted kind of, but like circular. And then the ceiling, only like the inset ceiling was painted sky blue.
Yeah, it was nice. They had nice windows.
I don't know if that was original or not, but
Probably. I don't know.
looked good.
I really don't know. There was a guy in there. I don't know if he saw us peeking into his house or
I
not.
don't think he noticed.
So there's one little anecdote about Sendak that I wanted to recount
Okay.
about a little fan, a little child that loved his book.
Oh.
Yeah, and he recounted, "A little boy sent me a charming card with a little drawing on it. I loved it. I answer all my children's letters, sometimes very hastily, but this one I lingered over. I sent him a card and drew a picture of a wild thing on it. I wrote, "Dear Jim, I loved your card." Then I got a letter back from his mother, and she said, "Jim loved your card so much he ate it."
What?
That to me was one of the highest compliments I've ever received. He didn't care that it was an original Maurice Sendak drawing or anything. He saw it, he loved it, he ate it.
What a dumb little kid. How old was this
He
kid?
just wanted-
Why did he eat it?
He just wanted to consume. He wanted it to be a part of
Jim.
him.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
That's cute and weird.
Yeah. So that's the end of our Greenwich Village houses for this tour. Obviously,
Yeah.
again, there are tons more writers.
Sure.
But we go across town over to the East Village.
The East Village.
Yeah, and we visit with Allen Ginsberg
Oh.
and William Burroughs, Jack Kerouac, the Beat Generation.
Yeah.
Allen lived in the area for decades
Right.
in many different houses. The house that we picked was 206 East 7th Street,
Okay.
and
yeah.
that's where Burroughs and Ginsberg lived together for a time. And there's...
Didn't you say Jack Kerouac lived there as well?
He lived, well, he not, yes, he did, but for, as far as I could tell, a shorter duration.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if he wrote one of his books, The Subterraneans, there or not. It's covered in this really great walking tour that we should call out. You want to talk a little
Yeah.
bit about it?
Yeah, it's this really cool walking tour that is an East Village poetry walk called Passing a Stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And it was it's called Passing Stranger.
Mhm.
I'm looking at some notes here. And it was made by someone named Pike Malinowski
Mhm.
and in collaboration with WNYC. And it's like an hour and a half audio tour to follow along 2 miles. So you spend a lot of time, if you were to follow it as it's made, you would spend a lot of time sort of like stopping and paying attention, and it guides you in which way to walk and then tells you about all sorts of history from just that small little area.
Yeah, absolutely. It was wonderful to listen to. We were walking a little bit faster than what the prescribed time was, so we both just listened to it kind of separate of walking around that area.
Right. I'd kind of like to do it again
Yeah.
at some point.
Well, it's funny because it also calls to go inside buildings and check things out, which is
Right,
obviously
which
not,
right now is just
not pandemic compliant.
No.
But it was really a great experience for being able to place both locations, but also how different styles of poetry were interacting at that time. There's the
Yeah.
Beat Generation, and then the New York School, and then the second generation New York School, which is like the Tulsa Gang, and
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff like that, as well as authors, poets, artists that existed outside of that era. The Walt Whitmans, the E.E. Cummings, the W.H. Audens of the world, and bringing it all together in a way with select poems that really, they did a great job selecting poems that were engaging
Mhm.
and illustrative of the atmosphere of the neighborhood.
Yeah. I also think even just separating it out into like the different groups of people, it was maybe the first time I've heard all of that sort of talked about at once. And I think when I hear about poetry from the East Village specifically, I always just think about the beats and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
And so I'm always confused when there's like some poems from that area and time frame that I really like, and then some poems in writing that I just can't even read 2 words that I'm just like
Mhm.
you with the book, just falling asleep. And it made a lot more sense to me to hear about it in those terms, where there were all these different groups of people working in different ways, and some of them, like, I don't think I knew about the New York School
Mhm.
of Poets. I don't think I knew that that was like a specific group, and that they like approached it with a lot of humor. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
there's
that's the type of poetry I
and
like too. Like, I often am like, I don't really like poetry, but I do like poetry when it's like funny
yeah.
and kind of silly.
Yeah. Yeah, and the surrealist angle as well. And I mean,
Hmm.
it was great to hear it all performed.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is the Beat Generation is definitely something that has had so much written, spoken about. It's not really. I'm not going to talk any more about it here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the New York School, which had Frank O'Hara as one of the main people, who was the curator at MoMA, I believe. I hope I'm right on that. But he died tragically fairly early, and
Oh.
it makes you wonder. He was only like 40 years old, I think, and you know Ginsberg was the champion of the beat authors.
Hmm.
Like he sent out manuscripts for all of his friends, and kind of created this community as a
Right.
consequence. And I wonder how much. I mean, how much having one of the New York School's own cut down so early
Mm.
hurt, in addition to the Beat Generation just being inherently um, like drugs and like kind of degeneracy was like a part of it too, that
Yeah.
attracted people in a
It's
different
so
way.
romanticized.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. I mean, there's way more that could be probably unpacked about the whole thing, but it was great to have this walk as like an opportunity to kind of spur my interest. And
yeah. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, like I said, I feel like I never really thought of it all like that. I kind of just grouped like poetry from that time all
yeah,
into one. And I'm excited to learn more about it and like listen and read more of that group's
yeah.
poems too.
There was a fantastic poem midway through from one of the Puerto Rican poets in the area, which is another
Mm.
thing that the podcast episode did, if you want to call it that, did a great job of exploring, where it was based on an actual event, or I guess the poem inspired the actual funeral procession of scattering the ashes on the Lower East Side, and it was
Mhm.
performed beautifully in the
Yeah.
episode, and it was just very, very illustrative of the neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, I listened to it and then I said to Mike, like, do you think that you could still scatter ashes on the lake? It was like this poet had written the poem that was essentially like writing your last will and testament, or like your whatever it's called, of like, this is what I want.
Yeah,
But it wasn't like an official, like, it wasn't notarized or anything.
right.
And then, yeah, the people that were fans and friends, and they took it seriously and they did what was in the poem. So, like, how could it not be a beautiful funeral procession
Yeah,
when you're following instructions from a poem and not from like a legal document or something?
right.
But I do wonder if you could still do that now. Like,
Yeah,
that feels very like, I don't know. It feels like you'd get in trouble now.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. Depends how
Especially with that many people like
maybe.
throwing themselves down into the ashes. Like, if that's really, yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see when we do it. Also want to call out that it's narrated, for all you film fans out there, by Jim Jarmusch. So
Yeah.
that was cool, because I don't know if I've ever spent any length of time listening to him. So that was fun to hear.
Also, I think he pronounces it Jim Jarmusch.
Yeah,
I heard that
I
at the
specifically
beginning, and
just said
he,
Jarmusch because I looked it up several ways to how to pronounce it because I used to pronounce it Jim Jarmusch.
Yeah, same. And I had this experience, which I think is kind of funny, that when I was listening to it and he introduced himself,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that guy doesn't even know how to say Jim Jarmusch. And then I was like, oh, that is that guy. Like, how frustrating if to be famous and have everyone saying your last name wrong.
Or maybe that's a good thing. Who knows?
Or maybe it's a good thing.
If you know how to pronounce it.
I mean, we're
if you have
watching
an
it with
opinion,
like
leave it in the
Kamala
comments.
now,
Yeah.
people saying her name wrong all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's a different situation, but also maybe similar in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Anyway, we had an opportunity to speak with the producer through email.
Yeah,
which was really
we
great.
sent out an email just to say that, we found the project, we liked the project and wanted to connect, and he responded right away. So yeah, we've gone back and forth a little bit. So thanks if you're listening, Pike. We've loved the support and have enjoyed listening to what you've done. It's been fun to just like connect with people that are doing cool, interesting New York-based projects in this last year while we've been doing this.
Yeah.
And then use what they've made to influence this project. And yeah. Everything pulls off of everything else.
Yeah. So moving out of the East Village and into Chelsea, I'm gonna go quickly over this one because we still have a bunch left, and I don't want to drag out people's attentions and enthusiasms too long. But we've also already covered this in another episode, the Chelsea Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
I almost considered not, having this be one that I covered it, but I only wanted to call it out insofar as it seems like this really dramatic merging point and almost a passing of the torch of the attention of artist celebrities from writers to musicians. That there is this changing of the guard that happens here as people, as popular music becomes lyric and important and something that people can be known for individually and not just like a folk tradition of songs getting passed down. But yeah, I mean, the names there are absurd. Arthur Miller, Arthur C. Clarke, Dylan Thomas, Ginsberg, Leonard Cohen, Mark Twain, O. Henry, countless other people have stayed there. It was one of the city's first apartment co-ops for a brief period of time when it was built and finished in 1885. And then it wasn't long before that went out of favor as all of the population moved out of Chelsea, and there was kind of like a bust in the neighborhood, and not like a drug bust or something, but like it just kind of
it wasn't.
Yeah, people were more interested in living in houses than they were in living in like a big shared space.
Gotcha.
So then it turned into a hotel in 1905, and it has had long-term residencies, which is since that's been phased out as well.
Oh, okay.
And it's now just a hotel.
Okay.
But there are some people that still live there that have been grandfathered in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And
I wonder who those people are.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be
They're probably
interesting.
cool.
Yeah. It's a strikingly beautiful, building.
It really is.
Yeah, it's in the either people call it like Queen Anne Revival or Victorian Gothic era.
It's funny how beautiful it is. I'm always shocked, honestly, because I feel like I link the Chelsea Hotel so much with reading Just Kids, where it's like not a beautiful place to live in that book.
Yeah.
And then you walk by it, and it really is just like this gorgeous building.
Yeah, it's under renovations right now, it would seem, or at least there's scaffolding all up around it.
Yeah.
But we got some footage. So moving along, there's another location in Chelsea, just a couple blocks down, at 14 West 23rd. This was the home of Edith Wharton as she was growing up.
Oh.
And Edith Wharton was a really important figure as far as we don't have a lot of other instances of this era, which was like the mid 1800s to like first third of the 1900s or so.
Mm-hmm.
She was raised in aristocracy. A lot of her books are about the aristocracy of New York and just in general. And she really suffered under she was stifled. I don't know if suffered, it might have, driven her, but how women were treated at that time.
Mm-hmm.
She had her first novella when she was 15, but she had to produce it under a pseudonym because it was not something that women did.
Oh, wow.
She wasn't able
What was her pseudonym?
I don't know offhand.
That's okay.
She wasn't able to produce her first novel until she was 40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But once she published, she ended up writing 15 novels, 7 novellas, 85 short stories, and just countless
Damn.
articles and poetry and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah. She won the Pulitzer in 1920 again.
Oh, wow.
For The Age of Innocence, which was she was the first woman to win the Pulitzer for literature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she also wrote Ethan Frome, which is a famous novella.
Mm-hmm.
And that is interesting because I don't know if anybody's familiar with the magnetic fields. The magnetic fields, who is principally Stephen Merritt, made an album called 50 Song Memoir, which each year of his life he put out a different song.
Mm-hmm.
And his 1988 edition is called Ethan Frome.
What year of his life is that? Do you know?
I think it is either his late 20s or early 30s would be my guess. And yeah, there is a stage production of the whole 50-song memoir, which Jesse and I saw kind of when we were first dating. She bought tickets for us. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, it's like year 1 or year 2. I mean, I would consider that.
After that. Okay, well, whatever. Yeah. It was cool. It was a 2-night thing. So he performed 1 through 25 on the first night and 26 through 50 on the second night.
Yeah, and there was AV accompaniment. And so
Yeah.
I guess at a certain point after the tour was over, they took all the accompaniment and made music videos out of each of them. So we can send or we can put a link to that music video.
Yeah.
But it's very simple. It's like a notebook drawing of the plot of Ethan Frome. And the plot is basically that this narrator meets Ethan Frome in this Massachusetts town, and he's limping around. And he's just a notable character. He asks why you're limping around, and he's like this. He doesn't clear as to why he is limping around, but he tells the story of his life. And he's got his wife, and then he's got his wife's cousin. And he falls in love with his wife's cousin, of course, but it's something that they can't, follow up on.
Right.
And his wife is sickly or thinks she's sickly and behaves that way, and his life is miserable.
Oh, boy.
And they, the cousin and Ethan Frome, decide that they are going to kill themselves by sledding into a tree.
Oh, no.
The last second he loses his nerve. And they, this is the Cliff Notes version, by the way. He just turns the sled just a little bit, and that's how he got hurt, right? And so,
Does she die?
well, it's not clear.
Oh, it's not clear.
Until the very end. There's a twist essentially at the end of the book. They go back to the house, and the narrator tells it so as though you think you're hearing his wife because her wife is so sickly and whatnot, but it turns out that the moaning and complaining is actually from the cousin, and that the wife has now been resigned to taking care of both of them. They all live in the same house, even though she was going to send the cousin away because she picked up on the vibes.
Oh my gosh!
And so it turns out that she was not, in fact, really as sick and bad off as she had to be. Like that when push came to shove, she had to take care of them. She could, but everybody was miserable. So
what a horrible story. Is this the real Ethan Frome story, or is this the Stephen Merritt's version of who he thinks?
Story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, she was very well regarded in her time. She was.
What a story.
Yeah.
Yikes.
It's a novella. You could read it. It's very, it's shorter.
Okay.
She loved to travel. She crossed the Atlantic over 60 times, which back then was not a small feat.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do it way of Greta back then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the way of Greta. And so one last thing about her, her father's family, last name was Jones. And there's another phrase, candle
Keeping
burning
up
about
with the Joneses.
was based on
Is
their
it based
family.
on them?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're learning where all the phrases came from. What
Yeah.
a surprise, writers.
Yeah. That's right. But yeah, they were real estate developers, so you were keeping up with them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, we're flying along, but all of these people are important. I feel like I need to keep making clarifications.
Yeah. Yeah,
Next,
that's fair.
we're going uptown to the Upper West Side now.
Okay, let's go.
Nora Ephron, real curveball compared to some of
yeah.
these other writers.
Yeah.
Nora Ephron was a journalist in the 60s and 70s as a young woman.
Mm-hmm.
She got into screenwriting in the 1980s, and that's where people really know her from.
Yeah.
So working backwards from most recent to oldest, we have Julie from Julie and Julia. From Julia to Julia?
I thought it was just Julie and Julia.
Julie and Julia.
This is the one about the chef.
Oh boy, I'm in it now.
Julia Child.
Yes.
Julia Child?
Yeah.
And
I thought it was from Julie to Julia.
I don't know. I think it's just Julie and Julia.
Anyway, very successful film.
Yeah.
Also, she
and
was.
it's about like a woman who cooks all of Julia Child's recipes, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least we know the plot.
Yeah.
We know the Cliff Notes version.
She directed that. She also directed Sleepless in Seattle.
Yeah, which you've never seen.
I have not seen.
Which shocked me.
No, I have not seen it.
I've seen it a couple times.
Yeah. Also, Did You Got Mail, which I feel like, for some reason, I think they're similar movies.
Oh. Wait, I'm pretty sure they're the same movie. Don't they both have Meg Ryan in them?
I think they might.
Also, and Tom Hanks?
That I don't know. Third movie,
Whoa,
which
we're
is
gonna
really,
have to rewatch both
which
of
is
them.
really why
One
I'm trying to get here.
of them ends at the Empire State Building.
That's great.
Okay.
The third movie, which is where I was really trying to go, 1989's When Harry Met Sally.
That one's great too.
Which is really what I think put her on the map. It wasn't the first one that she wrote, but it was really pretty meaningful.
Yeah.
And also really, like, for many people, the definitive New York movie. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all good. The very good movie.
Yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah. And
I'm really freaking out about this Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail thing now, and I feel like I wish I had time to figure out the difference. This is like the least important part of what we're talking about.
Well, that's why I never watched them. It just seemed like the same thing.
I'm pretty sure they're both like romantic comedy.
They definitely are. Yes.
And Sleepless in Seattle, maybe one is like someone has a column and one is like a dating site, like pre-dating site.
Yeah.
Like early. Anyway, it really doesn't matter that much. They're good movies.
Yeah. And
so we went to her house.
We did. Well, it wasn't just a house. Let's be clear. It is.
Oh no, that's true. It's like the fanciest.
It's the Apthorpe, which is 2211 Broadway on 79th Street.
We've walked by this so many times, and every time I forget that it exists, and I'm like, oh my God, that building is insane. It has like these gates, it has like carvings, it's huge, it has a whole courtyard inside.
Yeah.
It's too much. It's too much.
It's something. I mean, I wanted to go inside, but there are guards. I was, like...
It's like the fucking Buckingham Palace.
It looks pretty crazy.
It's insane.
I
wanted to go in the courtyard, but there's guards.
She wrote a piece in 2006 for The New Yorker about how she fell in love with the apartment. I'll just read a brief excerpt here.
Okay.
From the street, it's lumpen, Middle European, and solid as a tanker. But its core is a large courtyard with 2 marble fountains and a lovely garden, she explained. Her 5-bedroom apartment became home in a profound, probably narcissistic, and I suspect all too typical way, and it seemed to me that no place on earth would ever feel the same.
She had a 5-bedroom apartment in that place. How much does that cost?
Well, when
Even
Harry
back
met Sally
then,
money.
That's insane.
Then, 2006. I mean,
Oh, it was,
yeah.
I thought you said 19 something.
No.
Yeah, there's something like, I don't know how much time we have or like how much I want to get into this, but I just want to talk about my feelings for a minute.
Cliff Notes version.
Seeing that building up until today when we saw it in this new context, seeing that building as just like a building.
Yeah.
I have always thought it was so beautiful. I've always thought like, oh my gosh, I'd love to go in there. I'd love to see those apartments, like daydream, like we could live there kind of thing. Clearly a daydream. There was some weird thing that happened when we were walking and you were like, we're almost at Nora Ephron's apartment. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's like on one of these side streets. And then you were like, we're here. I got mad. I was like mad that I knew, like, I was kind of like, who does she think she is? Like,
yeah.
Like who? And because then I started thinking like, oh, actually, like real people live here. Like, fuck them. Like, sorry, I've cursed a lot tonight, but like, I don't know why it made me like really mad.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's no better way to
can't-
transition into the fact that
Oh.
she tragically died of leukemia.
Oh shit.
She
Well,
was diagnosed with leukemia in 2006.
I didn't know that.
And
Right after writing that article?
well, I don't know, around sometime, I'm not sure. She
I'm glad she got to live there. I'm sorry.
it's fine.
No,
it's fine.
but you know what I mean? It's
yeah, I get
I'm
it.
sorry.
She died of leukemia. She contracted it in 2006.
Oh.
She didn't tell
Whoa,
anybody.
that was really quick. Yeah.
She didn't die in 2006. She died
Oh, I
in
thought you said-
2012.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I did. Maybe I did say
Yeah.
died in 2006. She contracted it in 2006. She died in 2012 because she was afraid, and she didn't tell anybody because she was afraid her projects would get canceled
Oh.
and she wouldn't get insured. So she made
Whoa.
From Julie to Julia. That's really what I think it is. I
While
don't
she
want to.
was-
Yeah, I don't want to stop the cameras and find out what it's actually
fine.
titled. Yeah, while she was sick, she wrote it.
Wow. I mean, that's
Or
really
she made it.
impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I wonder like how many people have done that also, because there is this like, I don't know if it would be a stigma, but like, yeah, people would be concerned and like, rightfully so. Like this person's very sick and
Yeah.
this is a big project
Yeah.
and probably a lot of stress and like, is it a liability? And
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Well,
she died at age 71 from complications, pneumonia.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Oh,
but yeah, she left a lot of fantastic work.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive. And can I just, feeling uncomfortable. I'm not mad at her and I'm not the language I'm using is more just like, I don't even know how to, this is the thing, like, I don't know how to even explain what I felt. It was just something about like seeing that as like just an idea of a place where
Right.
someone could live
Right.
made me feel very magical.
Yeah.
Seeing it as a place where people actually live
Yeah.
when like other people very much don't live like that.
Yeah.
It was just like, it's excessive and it's
Sure.
kind of like disgusting
Yeah.
that there's that much like in your face wealth
Right.
in this city where like there's people that don't have homes
Yeah.
and there's people that aren't able to like feed themselves, and like we walk by like lines of people waiting for the food pantry, and then there's like this palace.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah.
And I know that that's just what this city is, but there was
Yeah.
something that just like struck me so hard today.
Yeah.
And it's not Nora's fault. Like, it's not, I'm not saying I don't mean anything. Like, it's not her. And it's
Right.
honestly no one that lives there. It's just there's the concept of like the inequality that exists in this city
Yeah.
was so strong when we walked up to that. Because I was just expecting like a regular brownstone or something, which is still fancy.
Right.
But like, okay. Anyway, have I said,
I
let's
don't
move
know.
on.
Have you said everything you
Let's
need
move
to say?
It's time to move on.
We're going to transition to our final author, we went up to Harlem.
Uh-huh.
And so if you're interested in people that are looking to make their work and their life about equality, we have...
Well, we had just gone to his house also. Had just come from this and had been talking about this particular author
Yes.
right before.
Yes.
Maybe that's part of what I was feeling. Okay.
Maybe it was.
Yeah.
Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes was a poet, a novelist, a playwright, and one of the leaders of the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah.
And that's along with like Zora Neale Hurston and Wallace Thurman, Countee Cullen, Claude McKay, and others. And, this was an era when, and his particular thrust was stressing racial consciousness, and also with racial awareness that was devoid of self-hate, which was something that was, very much a part of a Black identity at that point, in a way that this is like kind of propelled us into places where we are today,
Right.
with like understanding racial consciousness and like not buying into denigrating stereotypes, but like fighting against them and forming positive understandings of race. And his work, in addition to this racial consciousness and betterment, was also kind of jazz poetry inspired. There was a lot of rhythm, like folk and jazz rhythms that he incorporated into his work. It was really cool. Yeah. And interestingly, there was some kind of immediate tension in the generation that followed his in terms of, I guess, opinions on how empowerment movement should move forward.
Oh, what was the next?
I think he was kind of at odds with like the Black Panther and kind of like overt aggressive energies.
Yeah.
And I guess people didn't feel like he went far enough. Ultimately, I think that was reconciled, like moving forward. I mean, his ashes are underneath like a local like community center up there.
Oh,
And,
really?
yeah, and
Oh, wow.
I mean, they're like the other places. There's a plaque devoted to his life
At the house.
at 20 East 127th Street, which is a beautiful block as well. And so he also had some run-ins with the communist like witch hunts that occurred, in the McCarthy era.
Oh.
Yeah, where he went to...
Where they were coming after him as potentially being a communist?
In the 30s, he went to Russia with some other Black artists at the time, and they were talking about like making a film that was, critical of America's race problems.
Okay.
And that coincided with Moscow being able to build an embassy in America. So this is before the Cold War. This is in between the two world wars.
Right.
And so once that actually happened, like the talk about doing this film like died away, because Russia had gotten, like, it was kind of like as a...
Oh, he was like talking with
the Russian. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I mean, he had some like really, he wasn't or at least he claimed when he was being, interrogated by the McCarthy era, trials, he claimed that he was not a communist.
Okay.
But everything was done under duress.
Yeah.
And they had interrogated him privately before they brought him before the committee.
Right.
And so he ended up releasing an anthology of his poetry, but like removed the most controversial pieces because he had,
because he didn't want to get arrested.
The screws had been turned on him. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And I think, some people were critical of him for having done that, but it was this is a time where it was just a hopeless situation,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the whole thinking about that is so crazy.
Yeah.
But what are you, I don't think anyone can really judge something like that if you're not in the same position. And honestly, even if you are the same position, like you're not truly in the same position. Like everybody's life is different. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was, I mean, I'm always interested in authors that are also leaders of movements, and
yeah,
the Harlem Renaissance is like one of the most compelling stories of Manhattan and New York history.
mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it was cool to go up there and kind of think about that while we were walking around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. We were talking about something else, but we were talking about like books that were banned. And it's sort of similar to that too, like the power that someone can have when someone knows how to write and knows how to get all of their thoughts gathered in a way that is not only clear and legible, but also like engaging and related to something that is happening in the world around you directly. There's so much power in that. And I guess that's why it's scary to people.
Yeah.
Because there is the potential to make some sort of movement happen with something like that.
Yeah.
It's really cool and exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the last of our authors. I didn't expect it to take that long, but I guess every time we do an episode like this where we have a bunch of stuff, it always ends up filling up more time than we thought.
Yeah, because we're not just like reading through the couple pages that you have written out there. We're also chit-chatting in the meantime.
But I hope you enjoyed listening. If you have other authors that you like from New York City that we didn't cover, throw it down in the comments so we can talk to you about them. Because it's fun. It's fun to think about New York City being this, mecca for writers, and I mean still to some degree, but the focus of power and what writing is just changing constantly. I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit, whereas like what writing is now. And I feel like it is as much to support other types of content as it is content itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like screenwriting, or content for YouTube, preparing for something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's still people that are writing poems and novels and short stories just for the sake of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of times it also seems to be supporting something.
But yeah, I mean, I think writing, historically had captured the imagination in a way that's different than it does now.
Well, now we have so many options too. Yeah. Like for a long time, writing and reading the written word in print in your hands was the only way to really have any sort of entertainment or knowledge or connection to people outside of your smaller circle.
Yeah.
And then came along all sorts of new technology, and we're only getting more and more and more and more. And yeah.
But still remains one of the closest, perhaps, way of inhabiting somebody else's thought process.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hope it remains for at least a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I'm not ready for any weird brain goggles or whatever is going to get invented in the next 20 years.
Yeah. So thanks again, as always, for watching the episode with us.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked it, let us know by pressing that like button. And if you haven't subscribed and you want to, you can also do that. Share it with people. Leave a comment if you want to. We appreciate it all, and we see it. And yeah.
Till next time, take care. We're going to be in Manhattan once more.
Yep. Okay. Bye.
Bye.